This is a video about Year 1 edition, Polaris 1.9 on GOG. I didn't buy the newer DLCs. This is the first project of an inexperienced studio, I mean way above its pay grade. The game is filled to the brim with cutscenes and voice acting. What we get is abysmal motion comics, a lot of abysmal motion comics. Even the main menu is animated with vomit-inducing morph. It attacks the core of human evolution, the ability to recognize abnormality. It's better to not have any cutscenes than to make terrible ones. Back in my childhood, I was thinking about a hypothetical Fallout 3 a lot. That was way before Blood was announced. And one of my ideas was for aimed shots to actually be in first person and to take advantage of the scopes you are installing instead of your iron sights, including the mounting options for eye relief and stuff. If not customizable, then at least different scopes with different size lenses. See, it's not about isometry, it's about a game being an actual game instead of a pile of shit. And well, look at this, Phoenix Point has actually implemented manual aiming. This isn't exactly a sight simulation, and all guns have the accuracy of blunderbuss, but still. And I've spent half the game purely eyeballing the accuracy stat of the guns, because it's called effective range instead. And yes, despite the first-person perspective, with direct line of sight and real ballistic simulation, your dude will refuse to hit a clearly visible target, because the game is filled with invisible walls, because it's so hard to texture its geometry. Also, Watts will always try to stick to a targeted body part and to ignore realism. Each time I've accidentally targeted a leg entirely obscured by a shield-holding tentacle, I damage the leg instead. The game was created with ambition for a console and a tablet releases, so GUI is shit. The console GUI means the camera and controls are abysmal too, and you can't even rebind the worst buttons. It's a constant irritation, but at least it's a turn-based game, mostly. Still, having no proper stats and hover-over tooltips means you are always deprived of information, or even any general consistency. Your dude learns a skill giving +2 mana, and yet his stats card still shows 2020. There are no explanations for a lot of muddy language the stats use. The in-game encyclopedia doesn't help much either, and that's at the times when it works. If you try to use the search function, it renders the text out of bounds, and of course you can't open the menu during the enemy turn. Unlike UFO Enemy Unknown, you are not a paramilitary businessman making business decisions and doing contract work for the government. You reclaim your abandoned bases and from there scan for RNG nodes with RNG tasks. Save nitro recruits, take the resources, take an abandoned vehicle, or make a small decision after reading a flavor text without combat. Sometimes you even get a small side quest. The system is kind of stupid. It restricts the Antarctic with important missions, and it doesn't fit the narrative either. Instead of having an aircraft limited in range by fuel, you can magically refuel at every random node, active or depleted, and you can't upgrade your aircraft to research a new one. You can only acquire or build more, and none of the three our choices is an upgrade. One fits a full team inside, but is super slow. Another one is almost fast, but has the lowest capacity. The chopper is pointless until the sky battles are added. Basically, with how a lot of stuff is time sensitive and how slow our choices are, it's kinda better to just go for the fastest one and hull your main team with 2 transports. Or not, a fully upgraded small squad with mana replenisher is out to be enough for anyone. Oh, and cars are garbage. Forget about them. I only used reclaimed abandoned ones for base defenses. They take whole 3 slots and offer nothing. The carrying capacity of 3 soldiers is bigger than a giant car's trunk, and all of them are pathetic at offense. In UE4, an Avenger can fit a bunch more people than my entire main team here, and I will employ a weapons platform for scouting and against the psychic enemies. This here is not balance, it's plain gimping. Oh, and yes, by the way, instead of having one dog or picking equipment for your cars in the production menu, you have every possible combination of a mutant dog to manufacture in a list. Did I say that GUI is insufferable? The same applies to the whole equipment, inventories and manufacturing. Like, as a whole, this isn't any better than the original UFO, the game whose GUI was bad and outdated even at its release. Remember, it was released after Doom, and it's more cluttered than Wolfenstein 3D. It is only marginally better than Populous, a game which is 5 years ancient here. Not a good company to be in, eh? Instead of working for governments and protecting with civilians, here you have to deal with 3 fantasy factions, orcs, elves and demons. All hate each other and refuse to cooperate, but the game texts pretend that those are actually just three different political parties. Yet the game is tailored for you to personally wipe out 66% of humanity and align with the remaining 33%. No territory conquest, no resource control, no population conversion, no making city yours. Each battle is a complete genocide to the last person. Blatant genocide which goes against any logic and against your overall end goal to save humanity. It's like the building is on fire, but the three guys inside engage in a slap fight to death. Don't you have a more pressing issues? So yes, not people, elves and versus orcs. And they aren't even territorial. Somehow they are more or less evenly peppered around and mixed up. How the leaders could spread the word that far? How did the mayors decide to believe in some people from far away instead of their neighbors? Do they have the internet or something? And also, how they could replicate the futuristic architecture anywhere on Earth? You live surrounded by unshanty towns, and then you just decide to adopt Apple white hanging gardens and flying cars. You can actually be friends with all three, but to do that you have to side with the game's setting against the gameplay and ignore half of the mechanics, to be very limited in the early gears and resources, especially bad as having no aircraft, and in the variety of weapons. Also, you will just watch how the orc Hitler will nearly wipe out all the democratic elves. There's technically a neutral fourth side, but they have nearly no presence, and you can't even research the attack. So, unlike all the garbage attempting to clone you for enemy unknown, this game doesn't degenerate the combat formula back into the early 80s with a two-phase turn-based system. It does actually have time units or action points, but obfuscates them with bad GUI. You spend them in increments of 25%. The game saves you have for IP, and while you can significantly boost your time units for the movement and use that incrementally, all other actions still use up the defined percentage. On the one hand, that kinda makes it easier to calculate and seems sane on the surface. On the other hand, you lose snapshots and aimed shots, and it's much harder to calculate your movement points with no real numbers anywhere. There's absolutely nothing wrong with shooting many times during one turn, and it's not like the game tries to avoid that. The fantasy RPG progression system of magic skills allows you to shoot at least 30 times in one turn with the same character. The things you can synergize from combining the classes are quite interesting, but also underwhelming. All of the exciting stuff, weapons, armor, gear, are only side grades with minor stats variation. Your first basic gear is still 95% universally effective at the end of the game when you've researched everything. There are only like 2 or 3 pieces with no trade-offs, which are direct upgrades, as long as we don't count the DLCs. All progression the game has is in class-specific spells. Your secondary squad will have all the same gear and no visible downsides. Buy well will suck until they too become wizards able to shoot tens of times in one turn in exchange for mana. Or like having free Overwatch every turn with a pistol by having the secondary class being sniper. And yes, PP uses Overwatch instead of natural interception of free AP. You have to manually set your tropes each turn, wasting a ton of time fiddling with an idiotic cinematic camera and bad GUI. And Overwatch sucks. It happens in semi-real time with no impact on priority. So, while your guy with a pistol plays a stupid cowboy animation, the target will come near the shotgun guy and mince him, instead of being executed by his Overwatch. The Overwatch doesn't care what happens at all. Your dudes will shoot solid walls, they will shoot each other, they intentionally will wait for the target to go hide behind the cover. You're supposed to fiddle with the trigger cones, but with no control over trigger order, and with moving targets that is not helpful at all. Meanwhile, the return fire skill puts everything on pause and will trigger against you in the stupidest situations. And yours barely even works even for a sniper class. Overwatch is cancer. One of the spells your assaults can cast is to transfer 2 of their AP to a target, but the funny thing is that it's not guaranteed to work with verticality. Your dude will waste their AP, but the target will receive nothing. Another irritating thing is the ability to fumble jetpack. How? I still don't know when it will trigger and in which circumstances. One type of 2 basic crab people, ground soldiers, can be partially dismembered. That's kinda cool. But we are talking about just one enemy out of them all, and only partially. Removing everything they can use to damage you basically turns them into civilians. And after the mid-game, that is less dangerous than actually killing them. You still can disable body parts of our enemies, but it's not visually impressive. The other type of guns carries generic usable guns, which means it's often faster to break their weapons than to kill them. Even disabling both their hands means nothing, and there are no downsides, since the game doesn't have a full drop. There is a chance the enemies will drop something on death, but you can't influence it. Even if you fight against humans, even if you stun and capture them, you don't get human prisoners, you don't get their gear, you just let them go gaining nothing. At least you can add crab sticks, or sell them without mentioned queen ingredients. And the stun count starts instantly ending the battle since there are no enemies. So if one of your dudes got stunned or mind controlled near the end of the battle, your guy is lost even if you won, even when you defend a friendly territory. There's some environmental destruction, but it's fairly unpredictable. Sometimes a tree or a pile of junk you hide behind gets destroyed with bullets. Other times you can't remove a bush by shooting rockets at it for an hour. Only buildings walls are probably semi-reliable in their behavior. Grenade launchers are somehow weak in damage, so they are purely support weapon to remove armor. And yet you can shoot 4 times and reload 4 times with the light launcher in the same time it takes to pull a rifle trigger 2 times, while already being on target. Like, this is purely fantasy spells territory, but the devs in their announcements pretended that this is super serial business and the game is a tactical mill sim. Outside of damage to the narrative, this is mostly okay, but with calculating parabolic fire, the game can offer only the worst solution. So launchers are very limited on smaller maps or with tackling elevations and have the arcs of anemic people throwing dumbbells. Fire is fun, but it also kinda makes all non-parabolic heavy weapons obsolete. They still can't hit anything outside the point-blank range, and the flamethrower does a ton of damage, a ton of per limb damage, and denies an area, which makes it great in base defense missions or small nests. And of course the game discards half-full magazines. They don't look that expensive at first, but they add up. If everyone in your full team of 8 dudes makes in one shot, that's 8 magazines lost instead of using one to fill the rest. And when you use advanced equipment, you easily spend more resources on a stupid repeating mission than you get from it. If you are out of ammo, you can slap an enemy with your rifle or some other types of equipment. Fists are prohibited, of course. And your equipment takes damage, of course. But the amount of damage it receives is directly proportional to the damage you output. You can parade towards a fully armored Scylla and trash your plastic rifle at it, landing 10 damage each AP for hours until it falls dead. But once you squish a squishy worm with a rifle, you can see it disintegrate in your hands, because you landed like 30 damage in one shot. If anything, that should have been inversely proportional. The damage you fail to deliver from the impact to the target has to go into your rifle instead. And sometimes nothing of this even works, and the equipment gets no damage while you beat crabs to a pulp with your stock. I have no idea how it all works and why. You can instantly heal in combat with medkits, which are instantly produced, but healing takes ages at the base on the global map. In the early and mid game, while you have only 1 or 2 teams, you have more resources than time to heal before another emergency demands your attention. You don't even heal for pink HP, Jagged Alliance 2 style, and you can't chomp medkits outside of combat. The pure amount of the HP is much more important than broken bones. Those are just reset once you're out of the global map. And yes, if you tap Engineer's Mecha Cans batteries, you might as well just keep styling to heal everyone as much as you can, since it will go to waste otherwise. That also will save you some time on Geoscape. There are several predetermined missions with boring goals. Besides killing everyone, sometimes you need to extract civilians or go to a specific point on the map and flee. The latter is best done with one dude in a jetpack, instead of wasting your time and ammo on the combat and then having to run 8 people across the entire map. You usually finish it in just 2 turns, or even without a jetpack, just rushing in with a full speed spec assault and running away. Most of the battles in the game carry the hit and run sentiment, and you to extract. This is probably the only thing here that works for the narrative. The attacks on the smallest nests instantly end once you kill 2 Pinuses, which makes at least them completable by hobby teams by hobby rushes, so I am not complaining. You can build training rooms at bases, but they stop giving experience at the 7th level, which is nowhere near to a full deck to class soldier, who has also rolled 3 additional bonus skills fitting his role. No point in wasting points if your sniper rolled heavy weapons proficiency, which only will hurt their perception for 15 points. The equipment is mostly side grades, but even the DLC guns won't help you hobby teams, since they don't have enough mana and no good spells. At the point when you can afford more teams than 2, the enemies are so strong they wouldn't let the rookies survive and progress at all, making them a waste of time. If not for a bug, I'll get to soon. I think UFO maps are RNG every time, but here we have a limited number of exactly the same maps with just minor variations. In UFO you can have a UFO crash in an open field, a big one or a small one, where a tile set can be grass, snow, beach, forest that can fall into a barn or into a city. Here the layers are always the same size with minor variations. They always use the same theme, so they feel the same. The deviations are minor, and if you are defending a factory or a cathedral, you are always defending the same factory or the same cathedral. It's so damn tiresome. Your overall goal is to keep the amount of humans left alive from dwindling down to 0, so you will see these defensive missions a lot. A lot. Missing a city defense in UFO means that your income from that country will get a small cut. But by the mid-game you can earn your money by producing and selling alien tech to the third world dictatorships anyway, so it's not the end of the world. Here, each lost city brings you one step closer to the edge, and you're about to break! City defense missions pop up every minute or two, and they are all the same, on the same selection of slightly mixed maps with a low variety of enemies, half of which are more irritating than dangerous. It becomes extremely boring very fast, and if you do a bad job, your reward gets cut, while you are already operating at a loss here. Past the mid-game, they also almost always include a boss enemy, so only your main or the best your secondary team can defend them. But to progress you also need to send those teams to the actual missions. The defense happens so often you just have no downtime. Killing a nest that attacked the settlement would only make another nest pop up somewhere else. You have no respite. In UFO you could try to shoot down saucers over the ocean, to send them directly into a sequel. Also, there were periods of rest, with no saucers and sites. In Xenonauts you can just order a strike to clean out the wreck. In Jagged Islands you can train militia. But here you have to babysit every spot on the globe at once. If you attack a city yourself, you will meet a very strong elite units who will unleash a rocket barrage on you, will shower you with grenades, snipe most of your team without even being revealed. But when 3.5 crabs attack their city, where only 1/2 naked dudes were. Saving a city in the UFO gives you a lot of rare resources. Here it's a waste of resources to have an hour-long boss fight every 5 minutes on the globe. And that's on the easiest difficulty. Once you find all random locations and clear them, there will be no more random fights or resource income. But city defense missions start from the beginning, while you still have a ton of locations to clear and have no time. I would drop the game pretty fast with this crap if I didn't discover a particular bug. If you take control over the local forces, save and reload, their AP will be replenished. And that works only for defenders. Things that are technically similar do not get the AP back. That allowed me to send hobby teams to the defense missions, rush to get control over the defenders and clean up the entire map in one turn, without wasting my resources on that. I still had to spend probably 100 or more hours on stupid defense missions, but at least they didn't contribute to losing the game and wasting resources, and took less than 4 hours each, unlike before. The last boss fight is atrocious. If you didn't play it like an idiot, you are screwed. The videos of the old version show a ton of abuse of mechanics and the players still barely scrape by. A lot of those were significantly nerfed to a reasonable level. The only reason I managed to win is because I ignored half the enemy mechanics, exploited the stupid AI and had DLC. First you clean out 2 rooms filled with enemies and waste about all your ammo. Then you go to the 3rd room, where every turn you magically lose half of your HP and has no fight crabs now spawning every turn, and run around the entire room to have it shoot to a boss. But I wanted to check out the Ancients DLC, so I stalled for 100 or 200 hours more to get ancient weapons that need no ammo. Then, instead of going into a room of death, I was standing near the entrance, clearing out constantly respawning trash and trying to hit the eye of a needle with snipers and shotguns. The game boss has 4 indestructible walls, and it drops 1 down when damaged, because of course. From the entrance, you can actually hit a tiny opening between the two frontal segments and force the boss to switch the segments around. Once I got lucky with one of the frontal ones, being down, I've spent all mana and I had to deal as much damage as I can with all the dudes. Rinse and repeat. I saw people claiming that you can speed him up by poking out both plentiful eyes. But in my play it was playing peekaboo, with no peek, oh boo. It plain hid its eyes with no chance to poke them. Good thing I was outside its magically resistible damage magic. This is stupid. One revolver cylinder takes as much inventory space as a giant Gatling gun. I don't know how people with no classic magic abuse and with no new extremely finicky DLC weapons will try to tackle it. From my experiments, you can't even melee or explode it. And if you are friends with everyone and research all three wireless solutions, you will have no choice which ending you are going for. The first one you did is the one you get. And yes, this mission is the Mass Effect 3 ending. The only change is the color of the barrel you show way up Marauder Shield's butthole. Also, if you fail one ending, you can just return with an ending for another faction, or even your own. Remember, the game doesn't want you to protect the humanity, but for you to personally wipe out 66% of it. The story. This game has one of the worst clumps of story, writing, setting and narrative I've ever encountered. Okay, the whole thing makes so little sense that I'll try to write in chronological order to see if I even can understand this garbo. So, Beyoksatot sent a meteorite towards the Earth with a virus. After the events with Vril, some of it got frozen in polar caps. Remember, a virus. With climate change, it got released, took over the crabs evolved into crab people, and psy-crab people lured humans into the ocean for reasons. Let's be generous and say that crabs needed biomass, and humans are probably a lot of biomass. But then they've just stopped and sucked back all the grandfather's experimental internet gas carrying the Earth, which they've released. Huh? So now, in the post-apocalypse, 20 years after the collapse of the humanity, in 2022. The crabs have returned. Oh, fuck, 2022. The crabs have returned. Okay. 2 sleeper agents for Illuminati, a talking girl and talking African guy. Finally. As a main character, instead of being just 2 traditional talking naggers for the man burly, glowly, Anglo-Saxon man to give him orders and nag him constantly. Find a car and travel towards an abandoned direct league military bunker from like 70s. If robot assembly lines ready to replicate future plus 70 years into the future technology. When they arrive there, they find some more sleepers and claim ownership of the base and start pretending as if we were at full power all this time. And they are not just 5 guys in a derelict hole in the earth. The main 2 are locked in their appearance and are featured in the main menu, but otherwise they do not actually matter. So, during these 20 years, the remaining alive hobos have assembled into 3 tribes, one of which discovered how to edit DNA and had built ginormous cathedrals everywhere. Another can created an advanced free-will AI, combat lasers, super stealth, and has built Apple-wide cities with hanging gardens. The third one has created giant industrial facilities with new futuristic cars and jetpacks. You too have your jetpacks from 1970s. I remember it like it was yesterday. Yesterday I was wearing the same shirt I wore in 21, of course I wash it regularly, and took it from the wardrobe I was taking things from in 21, which was way back in Soviet Union. But yeah, in the post-apocalypse, we've needed only 20 years to get this far into the future tech, like Apple-wide hanging gardens and jetpacks. During your game, the crab salad mist returns to erect crab sticks, and crabs start to build a butt socket for your soft hot to download itself into. And that is the final boss. This happens only after the mist returns, not somewhere where the mist originates. And for me, the posterior hole has appeared on the land which was free of the mist and crabs at the start of the game. The bomb hole was clearly built after you started the game, not during those 20 years. So, the edgelord alt-right faction storyline is basically open text saying that the democracy is weak and drowned in squabbles, humanity needs a Hitler to rally everyone against the common enemy. Yet all the writing is about humans fighting exclusively each other instead of doing something usual, like not dying. And by Hitler, I mean Hitler. He may be posed like Elon Musk cosplaying with Tony Stark, but in actuality, in plain text, he's not let's like save humanity dude. He's all about was eugenics, was sweet concentration camps, was genetical cleansings. And his ending is Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. So much for a common enemy and rallying. And of course he is pissing his pants hiding in Wolfschanze and begging you, mutant crew, to come and save him. Mutations use a dedicated source, which has no much use otherwise. So if you ignore roleplay, you can mutate all your dudes virtually for free. His solution to a problem is to nuke a socket. Question mark, question mark, question mark. For free. So if he can't do anything without your Illuminati cosplayers from 1970s, how come he has basically assimilated PP in the end? His plan doesn't take into account crab people, crabs, or the virus itself. So this ending is pure fake. Nothing stops crabs from building another pop socket next month. And even if you eradicate all crab people, there are still crabs to lure people, and there is still the virus to produce new crabs. One surgical strike does nothing to the systemic quantic problem. The guy is literally Hitler, and ironically siding with him makes you a Nazi. In all endings, unlike in their real life, disciples just disband peacefully and remove their religion from the equation. They look scary and do trigger Nazis, but they are written openly mostly harmless. In the real life, even if they profit to remove yourself and say that the religion is over, it won't stop the cultists from continuing. How it didn't stop the followers of the Emperor of Mankind from building churches in his name. Anyway, her solution is to hijack the Kobe super deep borehole and to let the humanity to mutate or mutate the virus itself instead. And it does fix the problem. It's not like a whole human society isn't entirely reliable on the consumption of mutants of all forms these days. In your own bad ending, you still do the same boss fight for some reason and then just release a counter-virus to cleanse the planet, with a big chunk of humanity as collateral. The Apple hippies offer either to sabotage the virus and to free all the crabs, seemingly turning them into animals looking for a niche, aka the classic progressive and moving on ending. Or you can influence them to remake the Earth to be just like the good old days, and then to bend it to their design will, just like we do now, aka the classic conservative or back in mid-days ending. We were in our research into fighting the virus itself, these are believable endings too. And which final solution from them you get is dependent on your choices, made when they asked you a very important and decisive opinion. I can remember only one time where I can't recall decision fighting those endings, but otherwise all the writing is utterly generic and faceless, not tied to anything you chose. You pick responses that feel nicer and more lucrative to you, because they don't contain any hard questions anyway. Yet the game treats them like super important decisions. Or maybe not, maybe it actually was that one vague decision that picked an ending for me. The writing's just bad and inconsistent. The core theme of A Terror from the Deep and Cthulhu is kind of good, but they screwed up the execution. The dismemberable cries were great with the first-person mechanic. Tritons are quite boring, but their name and shellfish elements still fit the theme. But then you get utterly generic Nagas and pretty generic artillery heffalumps. Even cells become more generic when their heads mutate. Why not have crab scriber? Why no street sharks? Why no shrimps or seahorses? Why not have anglerfishes as psychic enemies? Why no coral armor? Turtles, medusas, stingrays, octopuses, eels. The ocean life is extremely underrepresented in gaming bestiaries. Both Marvel and DC have street sharks, while a game about Ocean's 11 Strikes Back does not. The gun design is utter garbage. They look bothersomely stupid. Your military-style production has so much plastic on it looks like Nerf guns. The Gauss rifle has duct-taped wires outside. Magic piercing weapons shoot light balls instead of having piercing sound and terrifying muzzle velocity. And all their icons have road construction color schemes. All heavy weapons are carried on bent hands. Maybe that's why the heavies can't hit anything at all. They are barely holding that crap and their arms get cramps. And stupid orcs, who are mushrooms, are smart enough to carry heavy weaponry on their shoulders. The back-mounted guns animations are bafflingly bad. Also, they are tiny, but are more powerful than full-sized equipment. And yeah, the terrible photographs of photographs talking cutscenes are everywhere. The whole art style is quite bad, and the graphics are utterly bland and impressive. What worse is that I started playing at max settings and it was fine, until the game decided to run at 20 FPS. The first several times it was fixed by a complete restart, but then it got stuck there, so I dropped down to ultra low, and it still sometimes went into 20 FPS lock on my 10900K, GF 1080 and 32 RAM. The game was even installed on SSD. Besides the constant lags, it was also filled with minor bugs. In the last mission sometimes it was lagging so hard that my Overwatch didn't even work, and there is no borderless mode. If you pick it up in the settings, the game will still be minimizing every time you click outside of it. The game has abysmal voice acting with shitty fake accents, and you will hear a lot of it. There are like 4 or 5 voices total, and they constantly spew terrible lines. The only VO which are not garbage are for Hitler and for Anu. Living Weapons Pack, the DLC adds several missions doable in the early games, which reward you with a new set of good armor and 2 unique guns, with a mediocre but require no armor. Blood and Titanium. The DLC adds some minor more missions and bionics, which are basically more of mutations, but use a lot of resources instead of plentiful mutagen. Also, it adds more enemies to attack the cities. The game forgets to mention that Anu's bionic bodies can use mounted launchers. It would be much better if you could help Subject 24 to take control over NG. Imagine you gain the ability to actually use all 3 bionic slots and you replace one crazy with another. And have an option to lead the conquest of all the cities to purify the population. That would make the whole humanity immune, also making it into strong soldiers, just as an alternative ending. The thing is underdeveloped and there is never a reason stated why you cannot improve all 3 body segments with bionics or mutations. Legacy of the Ancients. The DLC adds a couple of missions and a dump mechanic to discover ancient real sites. Those are random and you can spend a lot of time before getting all 6 without duplicates. First, you invest in an archaeological team, digging for several days. Then you come and shoot down angry robots, which you can imprison or dissect. So, when the archaeological team was digging out the site, could they not dig out the robots? How did the robots tolerate all this digging? Each site is a pretty tough endgame fight, which you can win only when you are already in the endgame, and can just go for the final mission instead. After cleaning out the site and getting a pleasant amount of the resources, you actually have to have one of the artifacts always as the mining site to actually gain the resources over time. And each time you go into a battle, they forget what they are doing. So every time you have to waste in-game hours to reset the production, during which another city can be attacked. The dumbest thing is that when you reclaim one site, one of the factions will call you and say that they are gonna take it away from you. Even you have perfect relations, even if they are almost entirely wiped out. And I bet they do actually attack when they can. I only had to defend the sites from crap people. Stalling and tolerating 1,000 more city defenses paid off for me. These guns are actually strong and require no armor to carry. They were ideal to the final fight. With when the game was finally released, and with it setting the pandemic in the year 2022, we could have ridden the corona wave with edgy viral marketing and exceptional cynicism. But they are soft, the game is mediocre and the writing is bad. While it's not as abysmal as 2K's XSOM movies, this is still not very good in its core gameplay. It's like UFO Enemy Unknown clone was significantly cut down for App Store, as opposed to XSOM visual novel padded up for App Store. Pity I finished it now. With 3 more DLCs promised, I missed out on a lot of things, and I doubt I will ever force myself to play this thing again.